Ramadan Online. Stay connected to the East London Mosque.
East London Mosque and London Muslim Centre would love to say thank you to the following businesses and charities for sponsoring our Ramadan Online 2021 programme: Islamic Relief, Muntada Aid, Global Relief Trust, Penny Appeal, Muslim Aid, Human Relief Foundation, Muslim Burial Fund, Irani Taylor Solicitors, City Realtor, AWMA Architecture. East London Mosque and London Muslim Centre would love to say thank you to the following businesses and charities for sponsoring our Ramadan Online 2021 programme: Islamic Relief, Muntada Aid, Global Relief Trust, Penny Appeal, Muslim Aid, Human Relief Foundation, Muslim Burial Fund, Irani Taylor Solicitors, City Realtor, AWMA Architecture.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome everyone to the second episode of Ramadan Drive Time, the show where we have conversations on important topics. With me today is a very, very special guest. He is the co-founder of Islamic Finance Guru. He is also a graduate of Oxford University and has also completed a MA, I believe, in Islamic Finance at the Markfield Institute of Higher Education. With me now is Ustad Ibrahim Khan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair for having me on. It's an absolute honor.
The pleasure is all ours. So today, as you know, Ustad, we are discussing the important topic of Muslims' attitudes to wealth. As you know, many of us feel when we see someone with a bit of wealth, when we see someone with a nice car, many of those who have, I should say, religious inclinations, who feel that, you know, that we should strive for the akhirah, feel that this is not something we should pursue. What do you think on this? Do you think that, what is the view of Islam on having wealth?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that often the reason why Muslims get confused between the two, you know, and thinking about wealth as somehow something, you know, evil, is because a lot of rich people are not necessarily good Muslims or Muslims at all. And a lot of Muslims that they see around them, particularly in the UK, you know, are not necessarily that well off, particularly the practicing ones. And so you have this particular, in university you see this, you know, very starkly, where the people who are with the ISOC are generally, you know, this is obviously a very big generalization, but generally people who are not so, you know, career driven, or, you know, they're not going after all of the investment banking, you know, vacation schemes or whatever. And then all of those people, on the other hand, the ones who are going after the investment banking vacation schemes, they're not necessarily the most practicing of people. And so, you know, you've got, for a young Muslim, he thinks, okay, so Islam means therefore I kind of give up all of that stuff, and the good and the bad within that. And then, you know, because of that, I now just focus on my Islam, and that's something very separate to, you know, going after money. But, you know, Islam doesn't say anything, you know, that suggests that money in itself is somehow evil. You know, money is really just a means to an end, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, قُلْ مَنْ حَرَّمَ زِينَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي أَخْرَجَ لِعِبَادِهِ وَالطَّيِّبَاتِ مِنَ الرِّزْقِ. Say, who's forbidden or made haram all of this, you know, the good stuff that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has brought forth as rizq for His human beings. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has brought this for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Qur'an, in Surah Nuh, when He says, فَقُلْتُ اسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّكُمْ إِنَّهُ كَانَ غَفَّارًا يُرْسِلِ السَّمَاءَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِدْرَارًا وَيُمْدِدْكُمْ بِأَمْوَالٍ وَبَنِينَ وَيَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ جَنَّاتٍ وَيَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ أَنْهَارًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that if you ask for my forgiveness, then I will, you know, reward you. You know, He will send upon the people who ask for forgiveness, He will send upon them rains. And for people who have crops, which is obviously the people being addressed, that's basically money, right? That's literally money falling from the sky. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is rewarding you with evil? No, that doesn't make sense. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is obviously rewarding you with good. But it has to be something, money and wealth has to be something that you understand its station as a means to an end. And the end is the thing that should be in your heart, and the end is obviously Jannah and the Akhirah and the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once that money starts becoming the end in itself, and it starts becoming that, that barometer of how much of a success you are, and that's the thing you start looking to as the sign of success, that's where it's not a good thing anymore.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because you described this disparity between people who, at university, for example, in the generalization in ISOCs, that there's the practicing crowd generally aren't chasing money, and the ones that are chasing money are not necessarily the most Islamic in their practice. So do you think that it's really hard to find a balance, and that's the reason why we don't see that balance often in society?
I think it's tough sometimes to find a balance, but my view on it is that if you think from first principles about this whole topic, then you cannot but conclude that Muslims need to manage their money effectively, and they need to try and get as much money as they can within the certain parameters that Islam has set. And what I mean by that is that if you are if you think about this world as a whole, money is the currency. It's that the oil, the lubricant that makes everything move, and that's not a good or a bad thing. It's just a thing. And so for Muslims to say, oh, I'm going to kind of ignore this lubricant that is a necessary part of every single thing that we do, like all of the clothes that we wear, we didn't get them given for free. This building that we're in, that didn't, there is money attached to everything that we see around us. And when you understand that, then it makes sense that a Muslim, as a principle of ihsan, you do everything around you with ihsan, and that means your relationship to money should be one that you do with ihsan, and you approach it with ihsan as well. And if that means, and by the way, like for certain people, having lots and lots of money may not be the right thing, but the point is that for certain people it will be. And if you understand your perspective and the thing that you're trying to maximize, and use the money as the means to get you there, then it's all good, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick one for those of you watching at home. Make sure that you like, share, subscribe and comment on our social media feeds. We've got an amazing Ramadan online program for you as part of our Stay Connected campaign to the mosque. So make sure you're there catching all this good Islamic content coming straight to you. Now, just coming back to our conversation, I think you're absolutely spot on, and I feel that many a times that stories about asceticism, zuhd as we call it, the idea of leaving this dunya, has kind of predominated the minds of a lot of Muslims. And when we look at it, we think that, okay, money, we want the akhirah, we want Jannah, we don't want to have that car and stuff, we don't want to have that nice suit. I would rather, we would say we'd rather not spend that money, or give it all in charity, or not look to do these investments. And some people, they genuinely bring it up. And when, I'd say, just to kind of play devil's advocate here, for lack of a better term, when you say that money is the lubricant that makes the world go around, what would you say to the brother or sister that would say to you, Astaghfirullah, brother, it is Allah that makes the world go around? How would you respond to this?
So I think that the first thing is, look, even the person who says it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who makes the world go around, even that person, he has to buy and sell things, right? He has to have a job, he has to earn a living, and that means that he's already involved in this this area of mu'amalat. So he needs to be thinking about how he can do that most effectively. But I think more broadly than this, look, Muslims are amongst the poorest in the UK. So I think out of the Muslim population in the UK, about half of them live in the 10% poorest constituencies. I mean, and frankly, we're in one right now, Tower Hamlets, right?
Yeah.
And for a Muslim to, and I think for each of us, we have a duty actually to manage our money and make it go further than than it has been before. And the reason why is because collectively wealth that gathers up is in part of this community. It actually defines how much of an impact and how much of a voice you have and what you can do with that wealth. Let me give you an example. Like the Church of England, its endowment is worth about £8 billion. Churches are empty, right? They're closing down left, right and centre. And yet the Church of England, just investing in very, very vanilla things, can make about £500 million every year just in income. They don't have the churches or the people that particularly care to spend it on. But imagine if the Muslim community had that kind of money. Imagine if East London Mosque or the Masajid in London had this kind of money and had that much money to then deploy. We wouldn't have any dodgy wudu facilities. We wouldn't have drug problems in our area. We wouldn't have people who there's educational issues or health issues. With COVID, we've seen it really starkly. We wouldn't have people who necessarily need zakat like we need to. All of these things are interrelated, and for a Muslim to think in just that pure micro level, I don't really want to deal with money because for me, I almost feel sometimes people delude themselves about what Islam means. Like emotionally, it might make you feel good to do ibadah or to attend a lecture or to wake up in tahajjud and pray, and these are all really good things to do. But just because of your inclination, you might not necessarily enjoy transactions and mu'amalat and all of this stuff. But it is incumbent upon us as Muslims to try and make that really go further. Because I don't particularly care about each individual person, but I care about the whole,
collective.
Right? Because if we as a whole are not trying to maximize our money, then that just leaks away, and every single generation we are just getting left further and further and further behind. And who are the people who make decisions in today's world? They're typically people who are affluent, well-off, middle class, well-educated, well-heeled, and they've got a voice. And if something goes against what they want, it very quickly gets sorted. When something goes against what Muslims want, no one even cares or talks about it or even thinks about it, and therein lies the problem. So I always encourage people whenever they talk to me about this is that try and look after your wealth and make it go further. Not because you love it or because you need to use it, but because ultimately, this is an amana that you're going to hand over to your kids and your community afterwards. So make sure you do that good job of looking after it while you have it.
That's a really good point. Very well said. I think, and this leads me on to kind of our next discussion point, which is on financial education. And I think that, I read this book, right? It was recommended to me by a friend, and it was kind of like one of this, bestseller, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it was the first finance book I've ever read, and the one thing that the author kind of really stresses on is that people have like no financial education, and the rich, the way that they teach their children about money, the people that are not so well off don't do that at all. And I think I've seen personally from myself firsthand that Muslims, when it comes to financial education, for example, that they've got no clue. Like we're still trying to discuss, what we should be doing with our money, let alone thinking about things like investments. So like when issues like cryptocurrency come up, when the whole debate regarding mortgages and Islamic mortgages and buy a house, or how do you go about doing this, Muslims are absolutely clueless. What do you think is the remedy for kind of like financial education? How does one get started in educating themselves here?
Yeah, sure. I think this is actually why we started Islamic Finance Guru many years ago. We started it off as a blog because we found that there wasn't really much Islamic financial education going on. And as the process at the time of me studying and Mohsin studying, my co-founder, we thought, why not let's just share this information in a simple way on the internet, because we're doing these notes anyway for ourselves. Let's just share it, and people seem to find it quite useful. So I'd recommend obviously checking out Islamic Finance Guru's website. We've got a whole load of really simple introductory guides to just financial education, halal investing, Islamic mortgages, everything. It kind of talks you through that whole area. I think Rich Dad and Poor Dad is a fantastic book as well. And I think that, just this awareness that you need to be managing your money better and well, that awareness in itself is a great first step. Because it's only once you have that awareness that you actually then start thinking, oh, hang on, I should probably change this, or, I might be spending too much on this. Oh, actually, I've got some savings now, what should I do with them? But if you don't even have that awareness, then you won't necessarily take any of these first steps.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think when it comes to financial education, do you feel that there is much of a difference in terms of receiving financial education from secular sources versus Islamic sources? Obviously, we know that there are certain things in Islam that are prohibited, for example, interest and other such transactions. So how does a Muslim kind of go about managing this? Or do you think that it's all it's easy to navigate? What would you say on that?
I think it's a great point. So most secular sources, when you come to financial education, they're not adequate for Muslims, because let's just pick any topic, the cryptocurrency, for example, right? Yeah. You'll go online, and then there's a whole host of different cryptocurrency publications and articles and websites, but most of them, none of them, to my knowledge, the main ones are from a Muslim perspective. So there will be discussions about decentralized finance and this new cryptocurrency coming up, and liquidity pooling, and all these, like what cryptocurrency, what exchange I should use. Coinbase listed a few days ago. So you've got all these discussions going on, and as a Muslim, there are an additional couple of questions that you always ask about this stuff. The one question is this actually halal?
Yeah.
And you need to know that in order for this to be a relevant conversation. And then the second thing is, okay, now that I know this is halal, or maybe it's not halal, what are the options, or what are the alternatives? And really practically, where are they? So this is kind of what we do at Islamic Finance Guru. We realize that there isn't for Muslims, if you don't give them those two answers, then essentially Muslims just sit it out. They don't really engage in it, or the not so practicing ones, they'll just go and do whatever it is, the mainstream option, and they'll fall into haram. So I think it's very important for Muslims to try and make sure that they seek knowledge, but always have that question mark there, that we need to just check it from an Islamic perspective as well. And look, there's loads of resources out there now. So on our website we've got a forum.islamicfinanceguru.com, where Mufti Faraz and Mufti Badal, they answer questions on Islamic finance and muamalat. We've got a Telegram groups now with 10,000 plus people.
Oh wow! Okay.
And a lot of very knowledgeable people in there about each of these different areas who've navigated this space before. So that's a good place to check it out. Then I think you can ask your local scholars as well. Although make sure that they are scholars who feel comfortable about answering those questions, and just ask them up front. Like, look, I want to ask this question. Do you know much about this area? If they say they don't really know much about this area, then find a scholar that you are comfortable with, who does know about that area, and ask them.
I find, definitely on this topic of cryptocurrencies and relating to it, when we find Muslims, when it comes to investments and such like that, like stocks and shares and cryptocurrency, which is like the new boom that you just hear everyone talking about constantly, generally Muslims, like we tend to, like you said, sit them out, or alternatively, we will hear about a fatwa from somewhere, coming from somewhere that it's haram, and then we'll be like, you know what, let's just be safe and not do it, because you might get one scholar saying it's halal and then another scholar saying it's haram, and that scholar that says it's haram, you usually listen to him quite a lot, you like his talks or whatever, and then the scholar that's saying it's halal, he might be a finance specialist, but like you've never heard of him, and then like I've genuinely had people that face this dilemma. So I think authority and knowledge has also become quite a thing. How would you say that Muslims should go about thinking? I mean, we discussed about financial education, of course, but when it comes to this attitude of, oh, let's just sit this one out, or oh, it's too much effort, I don't want to learn about it. Like, you know, how should we play this one?
So really interesting discussion that, because, you know, I think that Muslims, they need to be intellectually brave and courageous about engaging in these questions. I feel like sometimes Muslims, they misuse the hadith about how, you know, إن الحرام بين والحرام إن الحلال بين والحرام بين وبينهما مشتبهات لا يعلمها كثير من الناس, that, you know, the halal is clear, the haram is clear, and there's lots of grey areas. Try and stay away from them, basically. But the thing is, the entire world around us is filled with grey. If you think about it, and especially when it comes to mu'amalat, because, you know, the entire system is based on interest, you know, at some core level. So, you know, people sometimes, you know, this manifests itself in careers where people say, look, I'm going to be a doctor because that's the kind of, I know it's completely halal, that's the safer route. I'm not going to become a lawyer or an accountant or go into media or politics or, you know, all of these other areas, academia. And then these are the same people who then say, oh, Muslims are really badly represented in the media, we're underrepresented in politics, we don't have enough academics, we don't have any Muslim novelists. But then there's a reason for that, which is, you know, Muslims, practicing Muslims, I find are sometimes not morally courageous in going into these areas. Like, you know, and they think that becoming a doctor is actually the safer route. No, it's not. You know, in medicine as well, you've got lots and lots of ethical considerations, like the rise of the LGBTQ movement, those all sorts of moral issues. You know, what do you call it?
Plastic surgery.
Plastic surgery, and you know, the contraception, that whole field, euthanasia. There's so many moral conundrums that every doctor has to deal with every single day. And just because it's not obvious and it sounds good, like, you know, medicine, you're helping people, you don't realize it. And so I would strongly encourage people to be morally courageous. That's not to say go and do the haram. That's not moral courage. But what it does mean is that, you know, you go and engage in an area that might seem quite complicated, and you know that you're going to have to pick your path carefully through quite a, you know, dense wood of issues. But if that's what Islam requires, if that's what the Muslim community needs, then that's what we should do.
Okay, that's actually very interestingly and well put. You don't hear that a lot from a lot of people. Usually the attitude is just kind of like, as you said, the haram is clear, the halal is clear, stick with the halal, and just, I've seen a lot of Muslims try to take this route in general when it comes to careers and trying to balance what they feel is like, you know, a complicated world, how they react to this kind of like wide new scopes and new horizons. You've got all this AI stuff coming out, the Internet of Things, economists, and essentially is all a capitalist-based system, and like you said, there's riba at the bottom of it. Media, of course, has its part to play, and like you say, a lot of Muslims like that safe kind of engineer, lawyer, doctor, maybe a teacher, but that's about it.
But this is the thing, right, Khizar? So, you know, and cryptocurrency is a classic example of this, where in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, the world as we know it is not going to be the way it is. It's going to have moved on dramatically. You know, today, BlackBerry, Yahoo, MySpace, they're no longer to be seen, right? Dell is going, downhill at the moment, and Coinbase wasn't even a thing, you know, 5-10 years ago. Google is younger than I am, right? Google, I'm 30, but Google is younger than I am, and yet it's such a household name. So you see technologies rise and fall so quickly, and like cryptocurrency is a classic example. And so if Muslims want to get ahead in the world, we need to be operating at these frontiers, because it's a deep tragedy that Muslims, they become consumers of these things once it becomes the norm, but they are not operating at that cutting edge whilst it's happening. So to give you an example, TVs and all of this like technology equipment around us, Muslims were very cautious about TV and video. I remember the fatwa back in the day when all of this stuff was haram, right?
Yeah.
And if that's the fatwa, a practicing Muslim is not going to get involved in creating the next video technology.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And then by the time that it all becomes perfectly fine, and we're now on YouTube Live and with all these cameras, we're now consumers of it.
Yeah,
right?
we're far behind everyone else.
We're far behind. Sony is the one who actually dominates this space.
Yeah.
I want Muslims to be creating the next Sony.
Yeah.
But you only do that if you have that moral courage. And obviously that this is not to say that you just go into it and don't think about haram or halal. What it means is you go into these areas and you ask about the haram and halal from the reputable people, and you keep on doing that. And it's a difficult job, but you do it because that's where progress is going to happen. Absolutely.
I think you're spot on. I was thinking about, as you said that a lot of people like to fantasize about the Islamic golden age, the Abbasids and all of that. The age of scientific discovery, that almost everything a lot of stuff that we have now was based on how Islamic scholars had, started, figuring out certain things and getting involved in the natural sciences. So, for example, optics, a lot of what these cameras are based on came from an Islamic scholar. And we Muslims were the leaders and forefront. We were at the forefront of developing all these technologies, figuring out how the world works, so much so that the European world, which was a backwater at the time, was actually sending their kings and princes and their royalty to study at our universities. They would learn from us and take their knowledge back.
Yeah.
The books of Aristotle and Plato that are so admired in the West, they only exist right now because the Arabs had translated them from Greek and preserved them. The Greek was lost, and then the Europeans took the Arabic and they translated it back into their native languages. So a lot of people fantasize about the Islamic golden age, but they don't realize that what Muslims were doing, they were actively trying to lead in all frontiers. We look at great scholars like Al-Bayruni, for example, who was a polymath, he was an astronomer, he was a mathematician, he was he knew all these fields as well as Islam. And nowadays, I do agree with you that I think that Muslims have now fallen behind, and we don't want to. But I think that's changing. I think that slowly and surely more and more people are beginning to realize. I think part of it is maybe that now that we've been in this country or in the West for a few generations, we're starting to find our feet again. And we are now seeing Muslims enter new markets. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a new, atmosphere hopefully in the air. And I was talking to the brother before. A classic example of that is what the guys on Fido have done, which is, the founders came, some of them from Tower Hamlets, right, in this area, and they provide the ID checking technology that now runs people like Revolut, Starling, Coinbase, Binance. Basically every kind of major financial institution.
Wow.
And so, that I think is, they had the courage to go into frontiers and technologies that, were very, very early stage. And they pushed at it, and, alhamdulillah, they've done great work. And there's lots of other examples now, like the World Remit is a company that handles a lot of remittance to Africa with a Muslim founder. you've got lots and lots of people now, alhamdulillah, who are from a Muslim background doing incredible things. But I think we need more of them.
Yeah.
And we want to try and encourage and inspire lots more Muslims to go into these areas, but also to try and mentor people so that they can do it in a halal and permissible way as well. And because once you go into these fields, sometimes there is a tendency where Muslims who don't have that grounding can get lost as well, because there's lots of flashing lights, and suddenly there's lots of affluence, and you're no longer surrounded by a majority Muslim community. Like if you work in a shop in a Muslim majority area, it's a very different vibe to if you now are surrounded by non-Muslims, right? White middle class non-Muslims who you just don't have that much in common with. And so what happens is, when you go into these kind of fields, unless you're well grounded, you start, assimilating. And then it's a slippery slope. So both things need to go hand in hand, that Islamic education and making sure you've got the roots right, but then also pushing it out, pushing the boundaries to push yourself to try and achieve the maximum you can. Yeah,
absolutely. I think when it comes to, as we've discussed with financial education, it's so important that Muslims are now able to to establish infrastructure properly, and that can only be done with the correct kind of financial measures. And there's a lot of benefits to being wealthy, but of course we know that in Islam it's also a test. That nothing, even being poor is a test, and being wealthy is a test. This whole dunya is a test, right? So there's many people that, and I think I bring it back a step, that would say that, you're going to be, that they use the argument often, and I've heard this, that if you have money, you're going to be more accountable for it, so you shouldn't have money. What do you think about that?
If you have, as you said, if you have money or you don't have money, it's still a test. It's, ultimately, what is it that you have control over? You have control over your resources, of your time, your money, your effort, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking to see how you take those resources and turn it to try and get yourself to Jannah or not, right? That's the challenge. And some people, they will fail at that, and they could be very rich, or they could be very poor. And some people will succeed, and they could be very rich or very poor. It's like, don't, I think, well, I don't know if it's the right phrase, but I was thinking, like, don't hate the player, hate the game. I'm not sure that actually works here. But like, I guess what I'm saying is, it's all about you and what you do with your resources, as opposed to it being a good or a bad thing. Like, Sulaiman alayhi salam, when he wanted the arsh to be brought to him, he asked his courtiers who can do it, and قال الذي عنده علم من الكتاب أنا آتيك به قبل أن يرتد إليك طرفك. The one who had the knowledge of the book, he said, I will bring it to you before you can even blink. And then, the Quran says, فَلَمَّا رَآهُ مُسْتَقِرًا عِنْدَهُ. Like, literally, the Quran doesn't even mention it whether he blinked or not. It's like, beautiful in that it basically indicates he blinked, and then it was there in front of him. And Sulaiman alayhi salam, the thing that he said there is really interesting. Like, this is opulence, this is power. He's got this arsh before him at, literally the blink of an eye. This is a man who can control the weather, who can control the jinn. He has all of the wealth in the world. He can listen and understand animals and communicate to animals. This is power, and this is wealth. And what does he say when he sees this incredible manifestation of this? He says, فَلَمَّا رَآهُ مُسْتَقِرًا عِنْدَهُ قَالَ هَذَا مِنْ فَضْلِ رَبِّي لِيَبْلُوَنِي أَشْكُرُ أَمْ أَكْفُرُ. So he said, this is from the bounty of my Lord, to test me if I am grateful, if I am thankful, or if I do kufr, if I am ungrateful. And so this battle of shukr and kufr is something that goes on, throughout our human life. And the correct response to wealth is to do shukr and to then use it to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that's the correct response to all our resources, whether it be time or money or effort or our families or anything, right? Or the opportunities that we're given. That's always the correct answer. So I guess, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He warns, people in the Qur'an as well. He says, زُيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ وَالْبَنِينَ وَالْقَنَاطِيرِ الْمُقَنطَرَةِ مِنَ الذَّهَبِ وَالْفِضَّةِ وَالْخَيْلِ الْمُسَوَّمَةِ وَالْأَنْعَامِ وَالْحَرْثِ. He's warning people about women, He's warning people about wealth, about children, about land and crops, about horses, beautiful horses in our world, cars.
Yeah.
None of these things, you can't say women are evil, you can't say children are evil. Why are you saying then the wealth is evil? Or horses or beautiful cars are evil? Or land is evil? None of these things are evil, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is warning you about all of these things. Because if you abuse them and you approach them from the wrong perspective, then they become evil, and then they become really damaging. But the attitude and the approach that you take to these things, that's what determines if it's a good or bad thing.
Wow, that was really thoughtful. Jazakallahu khairan, Ustad Ibrahim. Do you have any final words before we conclude? Any final words to the audience and what you would advise them as Muslims to do going forward in terms of changing attitudes towards wealth?
I think it starts with understanding that wealth is, of course, look, the message that I'm giving is quite a good one, right? It's quite an easy one to sell, which is, look after your money, you're going to get richer, right? It's quite an easy one to sell. But more importantly, even if you don't particularly care about money, it's important for you to care about money because it's not about you, it's about your kids, it's about the community as a whole. And the way I think about it is, if the Muslim community is about 20% poorer than the rest of the world globally, if we can take this pot of money that we already have and increase it just by managing it a bit better, then we've done a good thing. And hopefully we slowly catch up with the rest of the world by doing this in a judicious way. So my message to people would be that do it for yourself, but then do it for the ummah as well, because becoming wealthier and looking after our wealth is genuinely a good thing for the ummah.
And can serve as a source of reward for the akhirah.
Absolutely.
Well, Jazakallahu khairan again, Ustad Ibrahim, for blessing us with your time and sharing your knowledge and expertise with us, inshaAllah. So viewers, there you have it. Today we have gone through the second episode of Ramadan Drive Time. We've discussed the importance of financial education for Muslims as well as challenging their attitudes to wealth. Inshallah, we hope that you will join us next Friday, where we will have, this Friday, Imam Khizar Hussein, who is going to be discussing with us the topic of applying Islam to oneself, to his family, and to his community. And inshallah, with that, I bring this program to a close. Stick around, inshallah, we've got an amazing program lined up for you this Ramadan. Every day we've got several programs going on. In the morning we have Qur'an and your Adhkar. In the midday we have a show specially catered to different audiences. We've got a women's hour, we've got a kids show in different points in the week. Check out our program on our website, and inshallah there's definitely something that you will enjoy. So inshallah, with that, we will see you in the next episode of Ramadan Drive Time this Friday, same time, 5 o'clock, live on ELM's Facebook and YouTube pages. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Ramadan Online. Stay connected to the East London Mosque.
East London Mosque and London Muslim Centre would love to say thank you to the following businesses and charities for sponsoring our Ramadan Online 2021 programme: Islamic Relief, Muntada Aid, Global Relief Trust, Penny Appeal, Muslim Aid, Human Relief Foundation, Muslim Burial Fund, Irani Taylor Solicitors, City Realtor, AWMA Architecture.